Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Toffino ball python. The Toffino is actually considered to be a visual double het. It's actually het for Toffee and het for albino. Both of them are recessive genes, but they're actually compatible. If you have one copy of each gene in a snake, you get a snake that looks kind of halfway in between a Toffee and an albino, and they look really similar as standalone genes. The only difference being that the albino usually has a really stark white background, and the Toffee kind of has like a purplish lavender colored background. And if you actually make a Toffino with one copy of each gene, you get a snake that has like a faded out lavender background, kind of halfway between the Toffee and the albino. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the potential of the Toffino ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to show you the two genes that make up the Toffino. And the first one I want to show you is the albino. This is what an albino looks like. Really impressive gene just by itself. This is actually a recessive, so you need two copies of the albino for a visual. And usually the albinos are like a bright yellow with a really bright white background. And a lot of them can have really high contrast between the whites and the yellows. And some of them can be kind of like a low contrast, kind of faded out through the whole snake. I think it really depends on the line of albino. As a matter of fact, I actually have an albino in my collection that is really weird. It looks like a high contrast like this on the bottom, where someone took like some faded out orange paint or something and just kind of painted little orange faded out splotches. It's almost like half high contrast and half low contrast. It's kind of a crazy snake. And most of your albinos will actually have really bright red eyes. You can definitely see on this one it has super bright red eyes that are almost like glowing red. It's pretty amazing. And here is the other gene in the Toffino. Take a look at this. Looks completely different than the albino. This is the Toffee. And Toffies, I'd say, as far as something that looks close to the Toffee, the closest thing I can think of is the Monarch. It looks really close to the Toffee. Although usually with the Monarch, it has a lot darker of a background than this. Almost looks exactly the same. And usually with the Toffies, the eyes aren't bright red like you'll see in the albinos. They have, sometimes I've actually seen Toffies with maybe just a little hint of red in the eyes, but usually they're really dark. They don't have the bright eyes like the albino. So if you actually take a Toffee and you breed it to an albino, 100% of the time your whole clutch is actually going to come out looking like this. This is the Toffino. This is pretty amazing. And it's kind of halfway in between. You can kind of see the background is a little bit purple, but not quite as stark, you know, like a really bright color as you'd see in the Toffee. You can definitely tell the difference between the Toffee and the albino. And if you actually look at the eyes on the Toffino, you can definitely tell that they're kind of halfway in between the bright red and the darker eyes. Even the eyes are kind of halfway. And kind of the interesting thing is, take a look at this snake right here. So this one is, if you were to guess what this snake was, you'd say, hey, that looks just like an albino. But the problem is, one of the challenging parts of this whole project is if you actually take a Toffino and you breed it to a Toffee, you would get 50% Toffees, 50% albinos, and when they all hatch, they all look the same, which is really challenging. They all start out looking exactly like albinos, which is kind of weird, and I'd say it's pretty much impossible to tell them apart when they first hatch. And kind of the weird thing is if you actually took an albino hatchling, a Toffino hatchling, and a Toffee hatchling and lined them all up, they would all look exactly the same. And then over time, over a few weeks or the next few months, the Toffies would have that lavender color in the background, really come in faster than all the rest. And the Toffinos, it would come in a little bit, but not quite as fast as the Toffies. And the albinos would stay like a stark white for a background like this. So that's kind of one of the challenging things about this project, is you hatch them out and a lot of times you don't even know what you have, which is kind of crazy. So take a look at this. Here's another challenging part of the project here. So this one is a normal ball python. It's het for albino or het for Toffee. So if you actually took your Toffino and you bred it to a normal, half the offspring come out as het Toffee, half come out as het albino, which is kind of crazy. And if you actually grew this up and bred it with an albino, the hatchling would look just like an albino when it first came out, and you wouldn't even know it was a Toffino until a little bit later when it started getting more of the purple color in the background. Pretty crazy project. So I kind of wanted to show you some of the limitations of the Toffino. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the same limitations with the Toffee or the Albino. They're really visually dominant. You work other genes into the mix, and a lot of times you can't see that much of an influence for the color, but a lot of times you can see the pattern jumbled up quite a bit. So here is the pinstripe, one of my favorite standalone genes, and this is actually an adult pinstripe. You can see as an adult, they really keep the really bright gold color, pretty impressive. And here's what happens if you work pinstripe into the Toffino. Take a look at this. The Toffee completely dominates the pinstripe. You can definitely see the pattern of the pinstripe and kind of the stripe on the back, and some of the pinstriping coming down, but it definitely dominates the visual appearance of the pinstripe. So here is the spider. The spider is usually visually dominant as well. The spider is pretty cool. It actually has kind of this spiderweb pattern right down the top and almost looks like calico coming up the side. And this is just one gene. You breed it to something else, half the offspring come out as spiders. And here's what happens if you work spider into the Toffino. Take a look at this snake. This is pretty amazing. The Toffino even dominates the spider, almost completely wipes it out. You can see just a little bit, kind of a faded out spider pattern in the back, maybe a little bit of white coming up the side, and you can kind of see the challenge working anything into Toffino, although there are a few genes that have really dramatic effects. I kind of want to show you this next, and black pastel is one of those genes. It has a pretty dramatic effect with albino or Toffee or Toffino. It's kind of an interesting anomaly working black pastel into it. And essentially what black pastel is a dark morph, and a lot of times when you mix it into other genes, you really darken the background, although you don't darken the background with an albino. I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think any of the dark genes really can darken an albino. It's really visually dominant. And if you actually take black pastel and work it into Toffino, take a look at this. This is really an amazing influence of black pastel into the Toffino. Essentially what it does is it really reduces the amount of yellow and brings in the amount of white coming in on the snake. Pretty amazing effect. But the other thing to keep in mind is if you actually take a look at the snake, this is actually a hatchling black pastel Toffino, and you can tell it's a hatchling because the background is still bright white, and this actually fades out and turns into a lavender color as it ages. So take a look at this. I pulled up another one that has a little bit of age on it, and look what happens to your Toffino black pastel. It starts getting this purplish color in the background. Pretty amazing transformation. So here is the Mojave. The Mojave is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So if you breed Mojave with any other gene in the blue-eyed leucistic, most of the times you get an all-white snake with blue eyes, but sometimes you get like the purplish colored blue-eyed leucistics, like the purple passions or the mystic potions. And here's what happens if you mix Mojave in with the Toffino. Take a look at this. This is kind of an interesting effect with the Mojave. The Mojave has quite a bit of influence, almost dominates the Toffino. Pretty amazing effect working Mojave into the Toffino. Kind of the problem with this snake though is if you're actually to breed it with another Mojave Toffino, if you actually got the super Mojave trumps everything. So essentially what you get is you get an all-white snake with red eyes. As a matter of fact, it'd be kind of like a dark red if you had a super Mojave Toffino. I didn't actually see one over here, but that would be a really amazing combo. It wouldn't have a bright red eyes like a cherry bomb or something like that. It'd be like kind of a faded out red, like a darker red-eyed cherry bomb. That would be pretty crazy. So here is the GHI. The GHI is another dark morph, and of course all the dark morphs with the Toffino, you can't really see the darkening of the background, but you can see quite a bit of a jumbling up of the pattern when you mix it in with your albinos or Toffinos. And here's what happens if you work GHI into a Toffino. Take a look at this snake. This is pretty amazing. Essentially what it's doing is it's really scrambling up the pattern and makes for a really impressive snake. Keep in mind this is also a hatchling with a really bright background. I didn't actually find one over here that had some age on it, so I couldn't really compare it. But you know, looking at previous examples, that all this bright white is going to fade out into a purple color. So there's another one I want to actually show you. Take a look at this. This is similar to the Toffee. This is called the Candino. As a matter of fact, a lot of people think that the candy and the Toffee are the same gene. I've actually seen a lot of hatchlings over here saying this is a candy slash Toffee or a Candino slash Toffino. It's similar to like a lesser and a butter, or some people think like the Coral Glow and the banana are the same thing. It's kind of the same thing with the candy and the Toffee. So a lot of times I'd say in most cases the candy version of a lot of these combinations is probably a little more popular than the Toffee version. A lot of people are going after candies and Candinos, and this almost looks exactly like the Toffino. A little bit darker maybe in the background, but there's a lot of variability between different versions of Candinos and Toffinos. And here's one I wanted to show you. This is like the ultimate snake right here. This is actually a Candino pied to kind of show you the potential working Toffee and Toffino into a pied. As a matter of fact, I actually couldn't find a Toffino pied over here, so I kind of cheated and went to the Candino side of the Candino pied. And I would say the Toffino pied looks exactly like this. And kind of the cool thing about this is, remember, as the snake ages and matures, the Toffino or the Candino, essentially you get more of a purple color in the background. But in this case, the purple color only appears in the Candino or Toffino part of the snake. So you get these yellow patches with a little bit of purple highlights in the patches, and then you get all this white from the pied, and the pied white won't turn purple, which is a pretty amazing effect. You get these really stark bright white pieds with the yellow and the highlights in purple. Pretty amazing combination. So I actually wanted to show you one more combination here with the Candino, and take a look at this one. I think you really can't appreciate the Toffinos and the Candinos unless you actually hold them in your hand and see them in person. Sometimes it's just hard to capture them in a picture or something like that. So this is really super purple, really amazing combination. This is the Leopard Candino, which would be pretty much the same thing as the Leopard Toffino. And you can tell this one has a little bit of age and is really getting like a high bright purple. Pretty amazing. And then the Leopard really jumbles up the pattern. That is a crazy snake. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Just Dash Reptiles asks, how long should you wait before you cut a clutch of ball python eggs? And that is a very good question. So ball python eggs, the incubation time is about 60 days on average, and some people cut on a certain date, but I'd say that can be kind of risky. There's a lot of things that can really change the hatch date of your ball python eggs. And one of the things I found up here in the mountains of Colorado, I'm actually up here at 9,000 feet, and I'm pretty sure the altitude does have an effect on how long my snake eggs incubate. I think they're a little bit longer than most people. Most of my eggs, if I just let them alone, they'll hatch on day 60, and I've actually seen some people where they'll hatch on day 55 or 56, something like that. It's pretty crazy the differences. And the other thing that'll affect your hatch rate is the temperature of your incubator. If you're incubating a little bit higher or a little bit lower in temperature, you can actually change the time before the eggs hatch. If it's a little bit colder, they take a little bit longer to hatch, and if they're a little bit hotter, they take a little bit shorter. They'll hatch a little bit early at warmer temperatures. As a matter of fact, in my incubator, I have quite a big temperature differential from the bottom of my incubator to the top of the incubator, and it seems like on the bottom of my incubator where it's a little bit colder, a lot of those eggs will actually hatch a little bit later than my eggs on the top where it's a little bit hotter, even though I have a fan circulating the heat. And the tricky thing is you don't want to cut your eggs too early to where you can risk the snakes coming out before they're ready to come out. So essentially what I do is I wait until some of the snakes actually make little slits in the soft leathery shell of the snake egg before I cut. And that's pretty much the safe bet. If you actually have, some people say you can just see one snake kind of cutting through the egg and it's safe to cut. And usually what I do is I wait for at least 2 snakes to start cutting, or preferably at least half the clutch where you see little slits in the eggs from the snakes. Then you can go in, and I'd say it's pretty much 100% safe at that point. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.